Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's WEConnect International webinar. My name is Maggie Berry. I'm the Executive Director for WEConnect International in Europe, and I'm delighted that you've joined us for today's webinar, Adjusting Your Sails to Navigate the Storm. Our presenters today are Fiona Blades, President and Chief Experience Officer of Mesh Experience, a certified women's business enterprise with WEConnect International, and they specialise in understanding people's experience with brands. And she is joined by Johanna Guerin, founder of Fit for Future. Fiona and Joe will be discussing how increasing your buoyancy can lead to growth, how to strengthen your capacity to navigate through stormy waters, and they'll share a simple self-support toolkit that makes the most of your strengths, knowledge and relationships. To keep background noise to minimum, I'm going to keep all participants on mute, so please do use the chat functionality to ask any questions that you might have, but there will be time for discussion and questions at the end. Fiona and Joe are going to talk probably for about 40 to 45 minutes. The session is being recorded, so you will be able to listen back to it again. And all that remains for me to say is thank you for joining us today. And Fiona and Joe, thank you so much for presenting for us today. It's over to you. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maggie. Thanks, Maggie. Yes, thank you. And thank you all for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to speak with you today. Fiona and I are really pleased to be here to share our thoughts and experiences around adjusting your sails, not just to navigate this COVID storm, but also to help you plan and prepare for any storms or challenges you may come up against in the future. We both hope you enjoy the session and, most importantly, take away some learning or some actions from the webinar today. So in the next 45 minutes or so, we will look at the link between buoyancy or capacity and growth. We'll look at strengthening your buoyancy in challenging times and how to prepare for challenges that you may experience in the future. We'll share with you a toolkit to make the most of your strengths, your knowledge, your experience and your relationships. And then Fiona will talk you through how these tools were applied in Mesh, giving you some practical examples of how we used what we'll share with you today in the Mesh team. So I absolutely love this quote. We may all be in the same storm, but we are all sailing in different ships, experiencing and responding to the current challenges in different ways. What I love about it in particular is it removes any assumptions. So of yourself, firstly, I should be doing this, I ought to be doing that. And it also removes assumptions you may have about other people. It's about recognizing we might all be experiencing the same challenge or similar challenge, but we all respond in a different way. So I want you guys to think about what brought you to this webinar today. And I know Jay asked you to do that prior to registering, but think about why are you here and just set your intention for yourself for the next hour or so. So let's start with looking at the zones of challenge and the relationship between challenges we experience and our capacity or buoyancy. So our capacity or buoyancy is the skills, the knowledge, the experience, the strengths that we already have or that we're going to build. So I'll start with the green zone. The green zone's where we've got low challenge or low stress level. Here we deal with challenges slightly more easily. Not much thinking is required when we're in the green zone. And also there's limited learning in this zone too. It's quite nice to be here, but to be here permanently can lead to some boredom and complacency. It's a bit like being a ship in a safe harbour, and that isn't what ships are for. They're not meant to stay in a safe harbour all of the time. The other thing I want to point out about the green zone is, although it may be a green zone for you, these may be challenges for other people. It's your strengths, your experience and your skills. That's what makes you or helps you to manage the challenge in a masterful way. I'm going to skip the amber zone for a minute because it's my favourite, so I like leaving the best till last, and I'm going to come to the red zone. And this is where we've got high challenge and typically high stress. This is where we experience some overwhelm, overload, and even panic. We might feel a bit out of our depth. We may feel unsafe. We might feel fearful in this zone, perhaps even defeated at times. Here we're in cognitive overload, not much space for thinking, and very limited learning in the red zone. So the aim is to move ourselves from either the green zone or the amber zone. And this is where we get our stretch and growth. So there's high challenge, but the stress level is lower. You do feel stretched, it's your growth zone, and you might sweat a little bit in this zone. You know, you might feel your palms get a bit sweaty, your heart might beat a little faster. But in this zone, you're able to rise to the challenge. You've got the capacity to do it. And there is thinking required in here. So thinking about how am I going to rise to that challenge? But the wonderful thing about this zone, it's the learning zone. This is where you grow. This is where you develop. This is where you learn. This is how you learn to do things differently. This is where you can take things from that experience into new experiences. So in this zone, your competence and your confidence typically increases. One of the key things about the zones of challenge is to understand and accept where you are. Once you understand and accept where you are, you can then commit to some action. So if I'm in the green zone, how do I increase challenge for myself? If I'm in the red zone, how do I increase my capacity, my buoyancy? And the aim longer term is to increase things that sit in your green zone or amber zone and start to decrease things that sit in your red zone, because you'll get better at dealing with stuff. That's what helps you to increase your buoyancy. And I'm going to share with you a personal example of when I was in the red zone and what I did about that to move myself into the amber zone. So it happened when Fiona asked me to collaborate with her on this webinar, and I haven't done one before. So I went into all sorts of thinking traps. So I started catastrophizing. Oh my gosh, it's going to be horrendous. I'm going to be awful. I can't do it. So to get me out of there, the first thing I did was some breathing. So that enabled me to have some clearer thinking. In doing so, that helped me to get some perspective. So it cleared my mind of, rather than catastrophizing, I was able to think a little bit more clearly. So I got some perspective. Well, I've done it before, maybe not as a webinar, but I've stood up in front of lots of people. I've shared my learning, I've shared experience, I've shared my skills with people just in a physical format. So that gave me a little bit of perspective. I also thought about, you know, what's the worst that's going to happen? What might be the best that could happen? And actually what's most likely to happen? And then I started to think about, okay, what can I do to make the best more likely or the probable more likely, rather than where I was that the worst was going to happen? So I then took some purposeful action. So you'll see I haven't got my camera on today, and that helped me very quickly move from the red, not quite into the amber, but I was getting there. It was distracting me from focusing on you and your learning. So I made that decision. I then looked at, well, how can I increase my skills, my experience? So I spoke to some friends, some colleagues who were newbies to webinars, and I had a chat with them about what did they do? How did they do their first webinar? What tips have they got for me? And then I practiced. So the great thing about Zoom is you can push record with nobody at the other end, and you can practice and listen back. So that's what I did. That certainly increased my confidence and definitely increased my competence, I hope. Still to be seen, hey. The lovely thing about the zones of challenge for you and your teams is it provides a language for speaking in a kind of non-threatening way about times when you might be experiencing a challenge. You may be in the red zone. So I like that it helps to open up those perhaps what might be difficult conversations. So I want to look now at buoyancy or capacity and why it's important and how it links to performance. So I've called this the performance curve. You may have seen it and you may have heard it referred to as the human function curve. The idea of this curve is that as we're experiencing increased demands or challenges or pressure, There's different places we can be on that curve. And remember, for everybody, it's different. So at the lower end, where I've got underload, actually a bit of pressure or a bit of stress or a bit of challenge can actually engage us and bring out better performance. So sometimes pressure is good. Don't think of stress or pressure as all bad. So you'll see on the left, I've got the two words bought out. So they're at the opposite end of burnout. I'm sure most people will have heard of burnout, but bore out is a relatively new term, although it was around in the mid-2000s. And this is where we're underloaded and there isn't enough challenge to engage us. And really interestingly, I only added this on at the end of last week because there's a guy in France, his name's Frederick Daynard, and he took his employers to a tribunal. And he took them to a tribunal because he was employed as a manager, but was consistently given menial tasks to do, or what he perceived them to be as menial. And Frederick Daynard won 40,000 euros in a payout because the tribunal said, yes, there was a link between boredom and the deterioration in his mental health. So for me, that says, you know, underload isn't necessarily the best place to be. So a bit of pressure helps. As we move along the curve, we come up to peak performance, and I am going to come back to sustainable pace in a minute. And peak performance is where we're at the top of our game. It's an exciting place to be. You know, we all feel great when we're doing the best we can and really performing well. But I'll ask the question, is it sustainable? And I will come back to that in a minute. When we get pushed beyond what is our peak performance, where we've got increased pressure, that can push us into the next block of overload, where our capacity to cope or deal with challenges is less. And so we tip into overload. And there are two types of overload. There's functional overload, and that's where we've got too much to do, but actually it feels manageable. And in actual fact, it might even be enjoyable. You may be able to think of some examples where, you know, you've had a lot on, but actually it's energizing for you. And that is absolutely fine being in functional overload, so long as it doesn't go on for too long or it doesn't stretch you too far. And that's why I've put on the warning signs up there. So cognitive, behavioral, physical, emotional, relational warning signs. When you're in functional overload, the most important thing to be able to do is to be self-aware, to understand and know your warning signs. So for me, for example, I may feel a little bit shaky. I might have a fuzzy head, might have a little bit of a churning tummy. I might withdraw a little bit into myself, and I might become snappy. And it's important to notice those warning signs so that you can pull yourself back and not go further down the curve where you have continued overload, and then the strain of having too much to do may cause harm to your well-being, your performance, perhaps even your relationships. And you go into burnout when the resources that are supporting you are depleted, and you can cope with less than you could cope with before. And that's called dysfunctional overload. So we've got functional overload and dysfunctional overload. And then I'll come back to that sustainable pace. And for me, that's the best place to be. And you may challenge me and say, but hang on, that's not as great a performance as I've got capacity for. But why sustainable pace is important is, should there be an emergency or a big challenge that arises, you've got some space to rise to that challenge. You're not already constantly at peak performance and an emergency comes in, so you may then go into either functional or dysfunctional overload. So sustainable pace is a good place to be. So I've spoken to you about overload, be it functional or dysfunctional, and I want to share with you some strategies for when you might be in overload. And I am sure that you will have some of your own strategies too. So the first thing is, know where you are on that hill. know your warning signs, and have some ideas in terms of how can I pull myself back up the curve if I'm going into overload, or if I'm in underload, what might be some of the things I can do to move up the curve. So remember, I'm talking to you now about strategies for when you're in overload. And sometimes saying yes can mean saying no. So what I mean here is, if you want to say yes to an additional task, another challenge, something else, either you're asking of yourself or somebody's asking for you, if you want to say yes to that and you want to do that well, then if you're in overload, you'll need to clear some space so that you can do it well and not push yourself down that curve. So in this instance, actually, less is more and more is less. So it's a bit of a paradox. Doing more will make you less effective. Doing less will make you more effective. So another strategy is having a short-term no, and I call this a renewal pause. And it's just a small break to catch your breath. So we see it in the sports world in terms of interval training. You push hard, you ease off, you push hard, you ease off, and you ease off to recover. So the same kind of principle here with the renewal pause. You see it in agriculture too, with a fallow period. And it could be something as simple as taking 5-10 minutes out to go for a walk. Something I've learned through the COVID situation is something called USB, which is interesting because it links to technology and how much are we using technology. But USB stands for unplug, slow down, and breathe. So I do that most days, probably 3 or 4 times a day, just for a minute or two, where I just say to myself, Johanna, USB. And I know the more I slow down, the more I'll get stuff done. The next strategy to share with you is the 80-20 rule, which you've probably heard of. So don't think about the numbers, think more about the principle, which is a lot of our value comes from a few things. And again, something that's been really important to me through the last few weeks and months. So I've started to highlight daily, my top 3 to 5 tasks that I'm going to do on a daily basis. And that has really, really helped me to focus and kept me out of probably overwhelm as opposed to overload. And I saw today, interestingly, a post on LinkedIn, and it's Warren Buffett, and he actually had a 5 out of 25 rule. And he said, list the 25 things you want to do in your life. Now do the top 5. Never think of the other 20 on the list again. Otherwise, they will take time away from the 5 that really matter. And I really like that. It's really simple analogy or way of remembering, actually, less is more, more is less. The next strategy I want to talk to you about is a strategic retreat, and that comes back into the zones of challenge. And a strategic retreat is actually saying no permanently. It's moving away from something or over the long term anyway. And it's about looking at what expectations have we got of ourselves? What expectations have others got of us? All the roles that we play in life, be it, a woman-owned business, a mother, a friend, a wife, whatever it might be. And all of those demands and expectations that come with those roles. And thinking about, where can I actually trim back on those expectations or commitments that I'm either putting on myself or perhaps others are putting on me? And when Jay asked everybody to register, there was a beautiful line here from one of the participants that kind of speaks this for me. She said, it's always good to trim our sails on a continual basis so we can catch the wind as it subtly changes. If it changes direction, or perhaps release some of the wind if it's too strong for us. And that's in business or when sailing. And I thought that was lovely link to the webinar today. I used to see it as being a bit like hedges or trees. They grow and grow, just like our commitments grow and grow. And we do need to trim them back, otherwise they become sort of unmanageable, messy. They're not lovely hedges anymore. And the last strategy I want to share with you is what I call real-time resilience. And this is about thinking in advance how you will respond in a situation if you're pushed too far. You know, if you're in that situation, your thinking, your ability to think clearly is lessened when you are in overload. So almost like a crisis drill, if you've got it done beforehand. So if I'm pushed over my limit, then I will do something. So for example, if I'm pushed beyond my limits, I will ask for help. If I'm pushed beyond my limits, I'll be resourceful. And you know, if I'm pushed beyond my limits, I'll be my best friend. So perhaps speak to yourself in the way that you would speak to your best friend if they were in that situation. I think it's something that we don't do probably enough of. So I want to look now at strengthening your capacity to respond to challenges. And I'm going to use a metaphor of a boat and the water level as a strategy for strengthening capacity. This metaphor comes from a guy called Patrick Pietroni, and Patrick was a pioneer in health and well-being many, many years ago. And he described health and well-being a bit like rowing a boat. And he said, when you experience an illness, it's a bit like crashing into rocks. You go to the doctor because the doctor knows about the illness and he hopefully fixes it. And that's a problem-solving approach. So he removes or lessens the rocks. So I want you to think of those rocks as challenges that you may be facing. So there is a problem-solving approach that you can take. But there's another approach, which is the approach that I want to share with you today. So you can see in particular on the boat on the left, there's not only the rocks, but there's also the water level. And the water level is your general level of resilience, capacity, buoyancy. And this level fluctuates either in different situations or on a day-to-day basis. You may respond less well on some days. I know for me, if I don't get a good sleep and the right amount of sleep, the following day I definitely respond to challenges less well than I would have had I slept well. And my clients have been telling me actually through COVID, their water level actually, forget about day to day, it's kind of hour by hour, their water level has been fluctuating. And when we're at a low ebb or our water level is low, then we're more likely to see the rocks. We're more likely to see them as bigger rocks too. And therefore we're more likely to crash into those rocks. If the water level's higher, we've got more energy. So, you know, some of those rocks we wouldn't see because the water's hiding them. We might float over the rocks. We might find ways of getting around them. So the level of the water, your water level, your energy, your resilience, your capacity is really important in terms of strengthening your ability to respond to challenges. So the water level can be pushed down and pushed up, and both of those affect your buoyancy. So on the slide, I've said the factors pushing your water level down, your risk factors, they undermine your capacity. They get in the way. They start to make you see the rocks a little bit more because the water level's lower. So you may crash, hence the risk factors. Factors that support your buoyancy, that push your water level up, I've called these protective factors, they increase your buoyancy. They increase your capacity to overcome challenges. So you can look at how to lessen or remove the risk factors, but today I want to look at the support factors. So those 4 pillars there. So these 4 pillars that help you to increase your buoyancy or your capacity. And they're called strategies, strengths, resources, and insights. And before I take you through these in a little more detail, I just wanted to point out, you can use this tool for an overall big topic, for example, resilience, or for a challenge that you're facing, so growing your business. You can use it for smaller things, so for example, sleeping better, exercising more, having a difficult conversation. It's a really versatile tool that you can use in different situations. It can be used for organisations, which Fiona will talk to you about in a moment. It can be used for teams. You can do it with teams, or it can be used just on an individual basis, which is what we're going to look at now. So when I take you through the SSRI, I'm calling it a buoyancy aid for this webinar, I want you to think about a previous challenge that you have overcome. And I want you to think about, as I talk through the definitions and my own, what strategies, what practical steps did you take in that challenge? What strengths did you draw upon? What resources did you use or go to? People, places, pets? Insights. What did I learn? What can I take from that situation with me to this situation? Any ideas? Any perspectives? Any sayings, perhaps? We're going to take a look at mine in just a second. And as I said, I'd like you to think about yours and start to build your buoyancy aid, your SSRI, to take with you going forward into future challenges. And think about what you already do, what you already have in terms of strengths, the resources that you already go to and draw upon, and the insights that you already use. I'm going to take you through my buoyancy aid, and I've adapted it for COVID. So the wording in bold are the things I've either adapted slightly or new things that I've added into my buoyancy aid, my SSRI. And think of this for, I keep saying it, but it's so important, not just in times of challenge, but ongoing. Continually reflect on your experience, become more self-aware, just like with those warning signs, and build your toolkit ready for when challenges face you. So in terms of strategies through COVID, what practical steps did I take then? Well, I always do gratitudes, hunt the good stuff at the end of the day. So the 3 good things that I'm grateful for each day. But I extended that to reflect on actually what made that gratitude happen. And over a few weeks, it became apparent actually that there were 2 main things that make my good stuff happen in the day. The first was around focus, and the second was around connections and relationships that I had. So that started to become a new way for me of working, particularly in terms of focus. So diet and exercise and sleep pattern, they've always been important strategies for me. I know if any of those go out the window, my capacity is definitely reduced, and I do see those rocks and challenges a little bit more clearly than I would like to. And then I spoke to you about USB. That's a new thing for me, as I said. Unplug, slow down, breathe. In terms of strengths, what strengths did I draw upon? I'm quite good at social intelligence and relationships and being able to use my network in the right way. So that continued. Resourcefulness. So here in the UK, furlough became a whole new concept for us. And in my role as a HR practitioner, I needed to build my knowledge and my skill around furlough in order to help clients. So I attended lots of webinars, still am, in terms of furlough. Kindness. You know, doing good does you good. So I do try to do random acts of kindness on a regular basis. So that carried on. And then a new one for me was vulnerability. I think the context gave me permission, or perhaps impetus, to kind of move out of my comfort zone and into some riskier situations and express that vulnerability and feel comfortable to do that. In terms of resources, what resources did I go to? Well, I've got a group of trusted advisors, be they family, friends, colleagues, Fiona's one, and clients that I turn to when I need support and advice. I love being out in nature, animals, nature, really important to me. My dog, Alfie, so continued, you know, being out there in nature, walking my dog. And then a new resource I added to my toolkit was doing a program with the University of Pennsylvania on positive psychology. And that was about building my skills for my future business growth and direction. So that was about increasing my capacity for the future. And in terms of insights then, so what have I learned? What ideas, perspectives did I bring to this challenge? So purpose for today, that was my focus, from seeing my gratitudes and what was driving those gratitudes being about focusing on what will give me meaning or purpose today. And I promise you, doing that daily, it soon builds up, and you soon start to see, oh gosh, wow, that is my bigger purpose. It can sometimes be difficult to define your bigger purpose. The other tool I use regularly is called ACT, A-C-T, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. So accept where I am and commit to action, do something about it. The other one are the 1%ers, so tiny habits, small changes. So for me, you know, I have to remind myself every day to drink water, daily exercise, the USB, tiny habits, because they're going to stick. And then the last one, and is a bit of an insight in terms of a saying, is I can't, but we can. And that links into social intelligence, relationships, and reaching out to connections, friends, family, etc. So that's my SSRI. And I hope while I've been talking that through, you've started to get a couple of things that actually you already do. And it's how do I make the most of what I already do? And then how can I maybe tweak some things for a specific challenge? Or what new things can I simply add in to increase that buoyancy? Now, nobody gets away from being at a webinar or seminar with me without me giving them some actions to do at the end. So it's 3 simple actions. Firstly, please know where you are on the hill and start to recognize your warning signs. The second, build your SSRI ongoing. Keep reflecting on experiences. Keep asking yourself, actually, what did I do in that situation that really helped me? Make this a living tool. It's not something that you kind of look at, put in the drawer and don't come back to. You know, live your SSRI. And then I want you to think about which one of your buoyancy aids, which one of the SSRIs that you've written down, will you deliberately practice to help keep you afloat when the seas get choppy. And for me, my deliberate practice that I'm going to work on is every day my purpose for today. So as a thank you for helping me to build my SSR toolkit by inviting me on this webinar and letting me have my first experience of it, I want to offer you the opportunity of a 30-minute bounce session with me on Zoom to look at either the performance curve, your SSRI, your zones of challenge. So that's limited number of complimentary sessions. And if you could please book before Friday, the 19th of June. So drop me an email and I'll come back to you. So thank you so much. I'm going to pass you over to Fiona.
Jo, that's been amazing. Thank you. Really appreciated what you've just told us. And I'm delighted to be here with other women entrepreneurs. And I just thought I'd share our experience of working with Jo using some of these tools. So right at the beginning of the year, we were lucky enough to have a 2-day strategy event where we got the management team, and this included people from the US, from Sao Paulo, from Australia, and from London together for 2 days. And I'm so pleased that we were able to do that, because I'm not sure when that will happen again. And Jo had prepared an amazing couple of days for us. One of the exercises that we did, and we went into pairs, was we just brainstormed what were the things that were holding us up and keeping us afloat, and what were the things that were dragging us down. And then we all came back and we put those onto Post-it notes, onto a wall, and you can see the results here. And then as a team, we went through and said, right, let's just circle the ones in blue that are the things that are most building our buoyancy, and the ones that we highlighted in yellow were the ones that we felt were really dragging us down. And I think if we go on to the next slide, what we saw was a couple of themes that came out. The first one was that what was really sustaining us was our culture. That was what was keeping the mesh boat afloat. And this was including our people, our optimism, our management team, the skills within our team as well. We realized what fantastic people that we had within Mesh, and this was helping our client relationships too. But on the other hand, we did have something that was dragging us down. And the core thing around that was our process. It was process-related issues. And sometimes we would just reinvent the wheel. Even though we did have something called the methodology, which we developed with a management consultant, over time, some of those things didn't get used or new people came in, and we needed to be doing a better job at things like training. So as a result, we committed to creating a role which was managing director, client delivery. And this was quite a big deal for a small company, because it meant that one of our management team, Marcello Garitano, who'd been with us for 9 years and had very successfully won business and managed clients, was now going to be put into a different role, which was all around an internally focused role, which was looking at our process, our training, our data, our infrastructure. So that was the first thing. And actually, I'm going to show you, this is the letter. I don't know if anyone can see me on the screen here, but this is the letter that I wrote to myself. Jo had a wonderful technique where she said, please write a letter to yourself 1 year ahead about what you're pleased that you committed to. And so this was one of the things that I had in there to try to keep me on track, to ensure that we keep this strategy going. The other thing that we did was each of us in the management team was assigned a role, and they were kind of obvious, dependent on where our real strengths were. But our managing director in North America, for example, Dana Di Gregorio, she was picking up challenger selling as something that we realized that we needed to do as an agency. If we go on to the next slide, I'm going to just show you our steering wheel, which we'd already done with Jo, probably about a couple of years ago. And if you look at the white circle in the center, this has our mission. And the mission at Mesh is to help create and measure experiences that grow brands, people, and society. And you can actually see the red equals the clients, and that's where we're looking to grow their brands. The yellow is where we're looking to build our own people, and the green is where we're looking to do things that relate to society. And I found this steering wheel really helpful because it gave me permission to do some of the things in this community society area that in the past tended to get relegated to the kind of thing you had to do in the evening or after work. Because actually we realized it was a really important part of our company and what we wanted to do. And within that, you will see that one of the segments in community is to support women-owned businesses. So we took this and we said, well, what should we do then, thinking about our strategies for 2020? So we overlaid what we'd got from the strategy days, and we had 3 core things that we were going to do. The first one was challenger selling, because we needed to win some new clients. And this, we also put a couple of our core values. We've got 5 core values at Mesh. And we felt that challenger selling was going to involve bravery and it was going to involve our creativity. So that was the first big strategy. The second related to our efficiency, and particularly looking at our technical efficiency. And this was also relating to one of our core values, which was precise. So that was an area that Marcello was very much looking at. And the third one was relating to a couple of our core values: specialist, because we're specialist in understanding and measuring experiences, and restless enthusiasm, which I think is part of our culture. We're always wanting to try to do something better if we can. But we realized that we wanted everybody to be upskilled, to be experts in their role. And you can see that we also had to implement a diversity plan. So for the first time, we'd actually put together a plan in relation to diverse suppliers and some specific actions that we wanted to take that we have been doing as the years progressed. So let's have a look at what happened next. COVID-19 hit, and all of a sudden we had to look at what we could do, how we could manage through that particular situation. And we reviewed where we were at the end of the first quarter. The first thing was we had airline clients with annual contracts, and of course those just went. We also had other contracts where clients literally postponed them. One literally a week after we'd won it, it was postponed. And even if those projects weren't being postponed and put on hold or cancelled, we found that our clients were quite distracted. It was difficult to have those conversations with them. But there were some really good things that were holding us up. So the first thing was that actually, because we are a small boutique global agency operating out of New York, London, Sao Paulo, Sydney, it actually suited us in many ways to work from home and all work globally together, because Zoom is a great equalizer and we were all equal and coming together as one team. So that has really helped us actually in terms of our culture, and something that we've recognized. Another thing that we were good at was crisis management, because we've had a number of crises over the years. And so we immediately knew what to do. The management team were back meeting every week. We had cash flow discussions. There were lots of different things that were happening in order to kick back in to how to manage during a crisis. The fact that we were woman-owned, we found was helpful, because some of our clients were getting in touch with us to check on our credentials. And even those clients that were postponing projects, if we'd already put in invoices, they did at least honour those and pay those. So I do think that that was a real benefit to us as a business. Our industry reputation was helpful, I think, because that meant that clients did start to listen to us over time. And the fact that we had diversity within our client categories. So we didn't just have airline clients, we had lots of other different categories as well. And that helped us too. So let's have a look, if we go on to the next slide, at what that meant. The first thing was that we came up actually using our purpose with a completely different approach to using our retail banking study that we'd started in the UK. And we repurposed this in order to help our banking clients, because we realized that what they did was going to have a big impact on society. So if we could help them every single week know, how are people feeling? How are they feeling about the pandemic, about what banks are doing, about what experiences they're having with advertising, what it's like to get through on the call center. If we could be reporting to them, it would help them with their decisions. So we put out a weekly newsletter, a Friday roundup and a Monday video. And actually, this has really been helpful for us as well, because we've won 2 new clients during this time. And the way we've worked with clients has been different. Rather than having a project and maybe reporting back after 4 weeks, we're now there sailing with the client in the same boat. We're delivering the information to them, and they are taking that straight into their own crisis meetings. So this has really changed the way that we've been working and has deepened the relationships that we've been having with our clients. So I have a little giveaway as well. This is our retail banking study. Now, for anyone working in finance, there's a lot of detail about how people are responding to different bank touch points in the UK. But if you're not working in finance, it does also have information about how people are feeling about the pandemic. So that could also be useful to keep in touch with people. Jo has been absolutely instrumental in helping us at Mesh to create a more buoyant boat. And I do hope that you found some of the techniques that we've talked about today helpful. I can't recommend her highly enough as our HR consultant. She's really helped us over the last 3 or 4 years navigate through many difficult situations. And I found that what she does is she brings calm to the situation, calm to the team, and she helps us and gives us the confidence to find the right decisions so that we feel good about those decisions that we've made. So at this stage, I think, Jo, we're going to have questions and answers, but thank you all for listening.
Fiona and Jo, thank you so much. That was excellent and very, very interesting. And I think, Jo, one of the comments you made really early on about ships aren't meant to stay in a safe harbour all the time, and that really resonated with me. And your graph as well with the green, amber, and red zones. Do we have any questions for Fiona and Jo? Jo, please do use the chat functionality. I've got a couple that I'd like to start with. I mean, through all of this, and obviously Fiona, you've touched quite in detail about what's been happening throughout COVID for you guys, but do you have what techniques have you found to be the most useful? Actually, a question to both of you, but what techniques have you found to be the most useful during the last 2 to 3 months?
Well, I've got a technique that Jo taught us, which I've used a lot, and she has an emotional wheel, which looks at how positive you might feel or more negative emotions and how much energy you might have. And there are different words on that, like anxiety or cheerful. And we use that at the beginning of meetings. So if we're having a management meeting or if I'm having a one-to-one with somebody, we go, let's get the wheel out. And where are we on the wheel? And we all say where we are on the wheel. And it gives us permission to do that and to say, it's okay. Do you know, I'm feeling a bit anxious today and this is why. And people might be feeling anxious for different reasons. Maybe they're anxious because of the whole COVID crisis, or maybe it's, I'm really worried about this deadline I've got today. Oh, okay, well, let's have a think about how we can make you less anxious. So that's been a fantastic and simple tool that we've used.
Fantastic.
I'd agree with Fiona on that. I think a common language, something that's non-threatening, that enables people to speak about how they are feeling in a non-threatening, non-judgmental way, and everybody is talking with that same language. I do find that's really useful. A couple of other things I think are good techniques. The first is around reflection. So really reflecting on, what's going well, what's not going so well, what might I do differently? So some simple reflection, and please don't forget what's going well. And we all too often forget that, which moves into my third technique around gratitudes. So looking at each day, our brains are wired to look for the negative and to look what's wrong. And so by journaling gratitudes and continuing that practice, building up actually what am I grateful for, and then taking that one step further, as I said, what made that happen? And for me, as I explained in the webinar, actually focus and relationships came screaming out of my gratitudes. That's how I got good stuff done.
That's really interesting. On the gratitude side, I know even internally within the WEConnect International team, we have weekly, actually we have twice weekly staff calls, and they've just in the last few weeks started saying that as we all talk about what we're doing, we all have to include well, we've called it a win, and whether that's something like you won a project, we've won some funding, or actually I managed to get this project finished on time, because I mean across the team we're all doing such different things, but we've started to instigate it. And every now and again, so I was like, I don't know if I've had a win. And then it's just breaking down all the different elements that come together to build the bigger project stuff. But my ears picked up, you said our brains are wired to the negative. Is that I think a definite thing that we are more likely to, I mean, I guess you are maybe like negative reviews and things like that. You're more likely to say a negative.
Well, and also it's from fight or flight. So, if we go right back, we were wired to our amygdala, and the red blob in our brain was, looking out for danger, what's going to go wrong, so that we could respond to that. So we need to train our brains to, you know, turn down the dial on the amygdala and turn up the dial on your prefrontal cortex of the good stuff.
Interesting. Excellent. Okay. So I've got one more question, and Susan, I can see your question in the chat box, so I'll come to that next. Just one more question. When you were talking on your curve in the graph, you were talking about the warning signs. Is there anything around the type of people who manage the warning signs better? I mean, do resilient people manage the warning signs, or see them sooner, or manage them better? Any insight into that?
That's a brilliant question, because you would assume that resilient people would be able to see the warning signs, bounce back, all those words we hear around resilience, but actually it's the opposite. So some research, it's quite new research, is showing that actually, because resilient people keep going, they persevere, they persist, they've got that grit, they've got that determination, they're so busy doing that they miss the warning signs. So it's really important, you know, if you are a resilient person, to just, you know, USB, just stop for a minute and take that time to notice those warning signs, know what they are for you. So I call it your stress signature. So, you know, thoughts, feelings, what's going on in your body, your behavior. So start to tap into and understand what they are, because actually resilient people may actually miss those, and less resilient people may actually pick up on them quicker. Okay. The other thing actually on that, and it's not just for yourself, it's also for your teams. So you may have someone who you know to be resilient and therefore may expect something more for them, you know, may want them to carry on, keep going. But, you know, sometimes it might be about holding the mirror up to a resilient person when you notice some warning signs. It's not about pulling them up on that, or, you know, criticizing that their behavior wasn't, you know, acceptable or whatever. It's just saying, do you know what, I noticed something a little bit different about you today. You maybe were a bit snappy, or whatever it might be. You seem to have been a bit withdrawn on the webinar today. So, you know, both for yourself but also for your team, being that mirror for your team too.
Okay, great. And I think it definitely the communication. And we've got a couple of questions. Susan's asked a couple of questions, and Wendy's got a question as well around team. So Susan's asking, how do you maintain and or increase your focus in this time of stress? And then a secondary question, right, is, has there been a silver lining around COVID-19 for your business? Fiona, that's maybe one for you, about if there's been a silver lining around it. But any thoughts on maintaining the focus and ideally increasing it, even when everything around you is has been how it has been in the last few weeks and months? Yeah.
So for me, in terms of maintaining my focus, I do what I call bookend in my day, and I've spoken to you about the gratitude. And the first thing I do on the day is I do ask myself that question: what is my purpose for today? What are the 2 or 3 things that I'm going to get done? Because I was finding that I was actually trying to do everything. I was on every webinar, I was talking to everybody, I was reading everything, and I needed that whole less is more. That was really important for me at the beginning of the pandemic. I felt like I had to be really, really busy in case I missed out on something, but actually maintaining focus or increasing is just that less is more. I do 3 to 5 things a day, and I give myself, you know, permissible losses. So if I haven't got everything done at the end of the day, I don't beat myself up about that. I look at, actually, do you know what, I have achieved some stuff too. Now, if I need to beat myself up about it, I will. You know, if it's because I, you know, haven't done it through laziness or whatever, then I will. But, you know, something about that kind friend too, you know, talk to yourself as you would a kind friend if they said that to you. So that's for me anyway.
And Fiona, any kind of silver linings around COVID-19?
Actually, there has been quite a big silver lining, and that was because we deal in real-time experiences and we're capturing them in real time. All of a sudden, everybody wants to know exactly what's going on the whole time. And whereas before, oh, well, I can wait a month, it's, you know, it's not so important to know what's going on. Now they need to know, because things change so dramatically. And we saw ads that were working perfectly well one week could be failing the next. So actually, it's demonstrated to clients why this data is so important.
Yeah, I read, I can't remember exactly where it was. I'll have to find it. I think it might be because it was all around how so much the algorithms around adverts and placing of adverts on, say, like on an Amazon or whatever, just how much the algorithm behind it has just changed because the human behavior just changed completely. And all of the things that they thought that, you know, that the AI knew, it didn't in this moment. I think it was on one of my Women in Tech websites. I'll have to look for it. It was quite an interesting take on all. Now we've got another question from Wendy, and she said, we manage events, and obviously with COVID, lots of them have been cancelled. We've got a reserve to keep the team together, but do you have any suggestions, techniques on how to communicate with the team? Because they're nervous and it's an uncertain future. Definitely think things will recover, but anything around as she said, keeping the spirits up.
Yeah.
On kind of our side, there were a couple of things. One, we immediately had a check-in a couple of times a week, 15 minutes. Everyone just came on Zoom, could say how they felt, just general chit chat. So that was the first thing to kind of keep the spirits up. But the other was going to our purpose. We couldn't do anything about all these clients cancelling stuff. We couldn't do anything, but we could think, well, what can we do? And that was what we all focused on. And we thought, right, well, we can help big banks. And if we help big banks with their experiences, that is part of our mission. So let's give that a go. And we've had a fantastic response from that, actually. And that gives us and makes us all feel proud of what we're doing to help. We're not frontline, but we're doing something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Jo, any other techniques from your side around that, keeping the team spirit? And an additional challenge, obviously, is when the team's not together. And you've got an extra layer of complexity around, you know, if you're normally a team that is, you know, together in person, then it's just an extra layer to contend with.
I think you mentioned the word uncertainty. As much certainty as you can give in times of uncertainty, that helps people. So that will include some honesty, and maybe not some not good news all of the time. And I know I said, you know, less is more, but in this situation, more is more. So the more you can communicate, the better. Yeah. And remember that your team are, they're made up of individuals. So, you know, spot any of the individuals in that team, perhaps that might need a little bit more time. And if there are people in your team that are positive, optimistic, you know, perhaps use them as firelighters and as buddies for those that are experiencing it in a slightly not so good way.
Wonderful, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Wendy. I'm glad you managed to hear. I'm glad you managed to hear that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, well, we are pretty much bang on the hour. As I say, I loved your statement at the beginning, Jo, about ships are not meant to stay in a safe harbour all the time. That's really resonated with me, and also that kind of trimming back on expectations, because I certainly see amongst our network of female business owners, you guys are all really, really, you know, you're high achievers, you're running businesses, you're normally, you know, in control of what's happening, and this moment has changed everything for, you know, everybody around the world. But I, you know, and the rest of the team at WEConnect, we've been really impressed and, I don't know if enthused is the right word, but just we have so much admiration for, you know, all the positivity that has come out from the network in this moment, and sharing, and you know, and running webinars like this. And I know some of you have joined maybe some of our WeB2BB huddles. Really, really valuable, and I very much appreciate Fiona and Jo sharing your expertise with us and your insights, and to everybody who's joined as well. Just, you know, there's a lot of support and knowledge in the network that we can share with everybody, so please do take up their offers. We will share the slides so you can see them again, but you can get in touch, and their contact details are on the slide, so we'll definitely encourage you to do that. And I thank you everybody for all the feedback. There will be more. We'll have more webinars upcoming, both at a European level but also a global level, so keep an eye out for that. They're all on the WeConnect International website. You can check them out there. But it just remains for me to say, Fiona and Jo, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you to all of you for participating, and if you listen to the end of the recording to this point, thank you to you as well. Have a brilliant rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye.